So this is the agenda of what we're going to go through tonight. Fairly simple. We can spend as much time in the demo as you guys want. And then I'll hop back over and we can look at some of those last slides there, and then definitely want to leave time at the end for Q&A. But I think we're getting started a little bit ahead of schedule. Yeah, we're about 15 minutes ahead of schedule. So we can keep that in mind. And please ask questions throughout. I'm more than happy to stop and explain things as we go along. Okay, so my name is Shelby. I graduated from the University of Texas at Austin back in 2013. So I'm coming up on 6 years at Credera in August. And this was my first job out of school. And I felt like I hit the jackpot. So I've stayed here for it feels like a long time now, but I graduated with a degree in management information systems. And so this is not the most technical degree out there. It is a development degree, but it's in the business school. So you learn, you probably have, anywhere from I think you have about 30 hours of programming classes, but you're also learning how to operate in a professional setting, how to write well. You learn accounting and all those other things that come with business school. So a lot of what I have learned, I learned at Credera. And I'm very, very grateful for that. I knew I wanted software development to be part of my career when I was in college. I loved it. I knew that was the only homework I wanted to do was my coding homework. And so that was a pretty clear sign to me of, okay, I might not know what all is out there, but I know I want to do software development. And then when I heard about technology consulting and found out that I could, pair coding with being on the business side, I was like, I feel like this is really for me. I am in our Microsoft Solutions practice. So of those three disciplines that I talked about, under our Technology Solutions discipline, we have a lot of other breakdowns. So we have our Microsoft Solutions practice, which is .NET focused. So this is using C# and the .NET libraries, Visual Studio, those type of Azure, those type of technologies. And then we have Open Technology Solutions, which is kind of everything else. It's AWS, it's Java, it's Spring Boot, and then front end, it kind of blurs across everything. So on the front end, we're using a lot of the same technologies like Angular and React and those different JavaScript frameworks. But yeah, so in 2013, when I was hired, I was actually the first, since this is a Women Who Code event, I do want to talk about the female aspect. I was the first woman to be hired into the practice since its inception in 2007. And so that was a lot of pressure when, as a 22-year-old, starting in a company and realizing that I'm the only girl in a room full of 40 men. But over the years, well, first of all, even just when I started, they were so welcoming and so great. I've never felt excluded or left out or anything like that. And then in the past 6 years, we've hired, now we have 7 women in the practice. And so that's been really fun. And this picture is actually from one of our practice retreats. These are some of the other girls in the Microsoft practice that I'm close with. And then this is a picture from this year's, once a year we do a practice retreat where we get off site and kind of assess our programs and learnings and all that kinds of stuff. Yeah, so it's been awesome. And then my current level is architect. So I got promoted in October to this level, and I had a lot of kind of back and forth on whether, we have 2 different tracks at Credera. You can either take the manager track or the architect track. And had a lot of going back and forth of whether I wanted to stay technical in my career or not. And decided that I got an opportunity on a project where I got to be an architect, and I loved it. And so that really helped me make that decision of, and what that really means is you're actually designing what the systems are gonna be. You're not just building them, you're part of the design process and the selection process of what are we going to use in this system. And I found out that I love that. So, and then just kind of nerdy about some of my favorite technologies and languages. Since I'm in the Microsoft practice, I do mostly C#, .NET, SQL, Azure, and JavaScript. So, do y'all have any questions about all that?
That's really cool.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I had a question.
Yeah.
So you said you were the only girl, in the group.
In the Microsoft practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's cause I'll be the only girl too, in the team. So,
yeah.
How was it? Cause it's gonna be the first time to be around all guys.
Yeah.
So how was how did you kind of overcome did you ever get uncomfortable sometimes or?
Yeah, so it's interesting. No, I would say I wasn't uncomfortable, and I'm at a point now where I don't notice it at all. Like I'll walk into a room and I'm the only girl, and it doesn't really faze me. But the way, at the beginning, what I noticed was like at lunches and stuff, I had to learn how to like talk about football, and sports, and and I do like those things, luckily. But some advice I was given early on about working in a male-dominated environment is to really make a conscious effort to develop one-on-one friendships with the guys, and ask them to go get coffee, or find a way to not just always be in a group setting, because if you can develop those one-on-one friendships, then it kind of, I don't know, makes you more seen and heard and understood. But it was comical at points. Like one of my first teams, I was the only girl, and I remember coming back from getting a haircut, and nobody noticed my haircut, and I was just like, guys, come on, I'm missing like 6 inches, like it's time. And so they obviously felt horrible, and they made me send them a calendar invite for the next time I was getting a haircut, so they could make sure and tell me that it looked good the next time I got a haircut. So it's kind of funny. But yeah, the answer is like there's no easy answer, but I think that you can find ways to make sure that people engage in the topics that you're interested in, even if you're not interested in that, and developing one-on-one friendships on top of the group dynamic.
Thank you.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Just want to note about Microsoft Solutions practice.
Yeah.
What there is actually mean, or what is that about?
Sure. I will admit, and my Credera people, don't judge me, when I got hired into the Microsoft practice, I thought I was going to be doing custom implementations of Microsoft Word. Okay. That is what I thought I was going to be doing. And it's obviously very wrong. But what it is it's using Microsoft frameworks to build websites and to build applications. So there's, like the company Microsoft, they write libraries to use the programming language C#. So C# is a type of language that you can write programs in, and they have built this extensive framework called .NET. And that framework gives a lot of things out of the box that you don't have to rewrite. It does a lot of things for you. And so that's what that means. It's that we are preferentially probably going to choose using a product that has .NET background if that's my skill set. But it's also, we'll choose whatever is right for the client situation. If they have all Java technology already, then we'll staff somebody from with a Java background, not a .NET background. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Following question.
Sure.
So does it mean you need to have a Java background or at least C++ to master the .NET or C# languages? Or it's like when you were there, you were brand new and they were kind of training you from beginning to...
Yeah, I guess that's a good thing I could add on here is what I knew before I got here. So like I had learned Visual Basic in college in Python, and then I had done Java in high school. But when I got here, all I did was C#. And so I had to learn that from the beginning. It's very similar to Visual Basic, so that helped. But I will say this is true. I think once you've learned one programming language, you can learn them all. Because just once you've learned concepts and once you've learned, then the rest is just syntax. And you can Google syntax. Life is open book, right? Like Google and Stack Overflow and all of those things are available to you. If you know what to search for because you've learned the concepts, then you can really learn any language.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, let me keep moving forward. Okay, so before we actually dive into Logic Apps, I think it's good to kind of set the ground on what is the cloud, right? And this will be, I won't spend too much time on this, but basically the cloud, you probably have heard of this in the past 5-10 years, it's very, very common, but it's when the servers that your applications are running on are owned by somebody besides you. So what the old days is you had huge server rooms and they were really, really hot and they had to be climate controlled, and it costs a lot of money to, first of all, have people that manage those servers and make sure that they don't overheat and that they're up to date. They have all these compliance upgrades that have to happen, maybe every night or every month or things like that. And so the way of the future is now to use servers that are maintained in data centers by cloud providers. And so some of the services that you get are compute, storage, networking, and analytics. I won't go too much into those, but then kind of just on some why you would, use servers that you don't own is because it basically, you can start up really fast. Like all of you could go sign up for an Azure account right now and have servers at your hand. Like there's no waiting period. There's no, okay, I'm starting a new company. I have to go buy 500 servers because I don't know what my load's gonna be. I don't know how many people are gonna come to my website. You just spin them up as you need them, which is one of the main benefits of the cloud. There's also all these right here. So cost-effective, scalable, current, compliant, reliable, global, secure. At the end of the day, like the benefits way outweigh, and there's lots of different opinions on this. Again, this is just my opinion, but there's lots of benefits to using it. And then some of the major providers, Microsoft Azure is the one we're gonna be focusing on tonight, Amazon Web Services, and Google Cloud Platform. These are the main 3 players in this space. And what's great is like cloud isn't going anywhere. If anything, it's just getting more and more prevalent. And so these companies are obviously all very big names, and they're so focused on innovation and making things better and better and better and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And so that's great for us as providers. The other one that I would add on here that's not on here is IBM. So IBM has a cloud offering, and they have their Watson system that they have as well. That's kind of the artificial intelligence and all of that. But for the most part, these are the major players. I'll put IBM like right underneath them. Okay, and then these are, the as a service terms are really common in cloud, but they're pretty confusing. And so just on these also, when you're talking about cloud, this is the kind of the first thing that comes up. These are the 3 different ways you can use cloud. First one is infrastructure as a service. So that's kind of what I talked about already, of saying, hey, I need a server to run my application on. I want all the functionality as if I own it. But I want full control over setting up the networking, the websites, where everything is stored, what file and folders are named, all that kind of control. You get full control when you do infrastructure as a service. Platform as a service is a little bit different. There's a little bit more abstraction. So if I wanted to deploy a website to Azure, I don't necessarily need to know all of the underlying, how it's set up and where it's located and all that. They have a platform called Azure App Service where I just deploy my code and my full application, and they handle all of the wiring and where it lives and all the permissions and networking and everything like that. If you've worked with some of these, same thing with Azure SQL Server, which is a database server. I don't care where the database lives. I just need access to a database. And so that's a platform that I'm able to use, but I don't have to wire it up or put it on a server anywhere. And then software as a service, this is probably what we use the most. These are things where we don't see anything. This is Office 365. So I'm curious, how many of y'all's companies that you work at use Office 365? Really? I'm surprised. If you don't use Office 365, what do you guys use for email?
Google.
Y'all use Gmail?
G Suite.
G Suite? Okay. Any others besides G Suite or Office 365? Okay, just curious. So that's a software as a service, right? You don't know where that code is or where it's running, or you just get to use it. Same thing with Google Suite and Visual Studio Team Services. All right, so now that we know all that stuff, that's kind of setting the stage for what Azure Logic Apps are, because they're in a type of PaaS, which is platform as a service, called serverless. And this is a new buzzword that if you walk into a room and you start talking about serverless, everybody's gonna be like, yeah, what do you know about serverless? Like, it's so cool, kind of thing. And so, but it's not actually, there are actually servers involved, which is what's confusing. So if you're gonna walk into a room and start talking about serverless, don't be like, yeah, there's no servers. And it's like, no, there actually are servers. Again, you just don't care about them. You never see them, you don't have to worry about them. But the reason it's called serverless is because literally all you worry about is your code or your logic. You're not deploying an entire application, you're deploying at as small of a level as like a function or a method or something like that. But what's also great is you don't have to pay for that server or that application while it's not being used. So if you have a website, if you have www.shelby.com, I'm paying for that even if nobody's using it, if nobody's hitting it, anything like that, But for serverless, I'm literally only paying when there is an active person using that page or that function or that whatever. And so it's obviously cheaper. And then, yeah, it's really good for event triggered architecture. So only when like if somebody logs on and this thing needs to go spin off and go do its thing, it was triggered by an event, and that's a really good use case for using serverless, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. Okay, so we're gonna watch a video real fast.
Small group.
Wouldn't it be nice if you could connect all the apps and services your business relies on? Welcome to Azure Logic Apps. Easy way to automate many of the workflows you have in place without writing a single line of code. Let's say a ticket gets created in Zendesk. You can automatically detect the intent of the message with language understanding cognitive services. Create an item in SharePoint to track the issue, and if the customer isn't in your database, automatically add them to your Salesforce or Dynamics 365 CRM, then send a follow-up email acknowledging your request. And that's just one example. You can automatically separate positive and negative tweets about your company, then populate a Power BI dashboard improving customer service, or automatically approve orders under a certain dollar amount and quickly route bigger orders to the right people for approval. And everyone involved gets updated as you go. The point is, with Logic Apps, your company can run smarter by working more efficiently. Now, whether your company needs to connect to on-premise systems, the cloud, or a combination of the two. Plus, you only pay for what you use. There are no big upfront costs. To get started, try one of our templates. See how easy it is to connect everything with everyone. Before you know it, you'll be making apps to automate the services your company relies on most. With Logic Apps, only from Microsoft.
Microsoft does a great job of creating really pretty videos, like this like soothing voice. It's awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of walk through some of the main components of Logic Apps, and then we'll switch over to the portal so you guys can really see what I'm talking about. So the video was really short, but basically Logic Apps are a serverless offering, which means that you can do it's code, it's a workflow, right? It's logic of, if this happens, I want this to happen, and these can be two completely unrelated systems, but I don't want to go hire a consulting firm or somebody to go spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to build a custom integration between Zendesk and SharePoint or something. I guess that was one of the examples. Azure's done that for you. They've gone out to all of these companies and gotten their APIs, and now we have access to them. There's over 200 different connections, is what they're called, connectors, and so that we don't have to do the legwork, right? There's somebody out there already who's used the Zendesk API. I don't need to go write that integration to go call that API anymore. There's a standard one out there that I can use. So the main components of Logic Apps are, like I mentioned before, there's a trigger. There's some sort of like event-based mechanism that says, all right, it's time to start. And the example they just showed you, it was a ticket gets created in Zendesk. So what I would do is I would go create, my trigger is going to be from the company Zendesk, and it would give me all the options of when a ticket is created, when a ticket is closed, when a ticket changes owner, when a ticket there's all these different events that I can watch. And so there's triggers that are connectors, which is kind of some of the examples here, which use an API. So when a tweet is posted on Twitter, when a message is received in a service bus, which is a more technical example, when a record is created in Salesforce, when an email arrives, there's so many. And then there's also ones that are more basic, like a schedule of, hey, I want my Logic app to run every day at 4 o'clock. That's as simple as that. And then there's some settings on there which won't mean much to you guys now. I'll show them to you in a second, but there are some important settings, and I'll send out this deck to Carrie so that she can, or we actually have y'all's emails if you signed up on the sign-in sheet, and I can send this out. And then, so after you have a trigger and your Logic app is invoked, you have to tell it what to do. So the actions are actually the steps in the logic. And so this is your code, but in a visual format of, hey, I need to do an if statement. I need to do a for each loop. I need to initialize a variable. All those kinds of things are just basic, this is code, but it's actually in a visual format. And then there's also connector examples, which are talking to some sort of outside system through an API. such as save a record to a database, modify something in Salesforce. Personally, I think the Google Sheets one is super valuable because so many organizations still run on Google Sheets. And just like all of their data is stored in spreadsheets all over the world, and it's, I thought this is really useful. Post a message in Slack, Jira, there's a million different, I'll show you in a second. And then the API connections are the authentication between your Logic app and that in Salesforce, Google, whatever that is, there's that connection that gets made. Okay, so let's hop over. I'm sure y'all have questions about this, but let's hop over to the portal and then we can come back to this. All right, so I have 2 demos for you guys today, and they are actually both use cases from my personal life. So this is the Azure portal. Can y'all see that okay? I need to turn off another light. Okay. So the way that you get access to those servers that you don't own and manage the resources that you have on those servers that you don't own is through a portal. So they all have them. AWS, Amazon Web Services has a portal. This is the Azure portal. Google Cloud Platform has a portal. And I'm going to be focusing on how Azure teaches it. But basically, you organize the different services and platforms and things like that into resource groups. So I have a resource group here for tonight. And inside of here, you can see these are the list of resources that I've created. And I'll show you guys kind of some use cases of why I needed these Logic apps. And then we have tons of time, so we can even like create a new one if you guys want. All right, so let's do this one. This is, I'm using, I sit on the board at my church. And so one of the things that, some of the systems that we have at my church are, we have a website that uses a content management system that some other company has set up and gives us access to. And then we also use MailChimp. So MailChimp is a service that allows you to customize and do really pretty emails and manage your members and send them out. But these 2 systems do not talk to each other, right? Like a custom CMS and MailChimp, those don't know how to play. But what I identified as a use case here is whenever somebody goes to my church's website and fills out the next steps, like, hey, I want to know more about your church, what do you do? When they fill out this form, I want to automatically add them to our MailChimp list, right? So that they get our weekly emails, and that's something that I've manually been doing. That's part of my job at my church is, hey, any new person that fills out our contact form, make sure they get added to the weekly email that goes out. And now with this Logic app, I don't have to do that anymore. So basically in here, what's happened is that the trigger that I set up is when my next steps email is received, because whenever somebody fills this out, we get an email that says, and I'll kind of show you all that. It shows, that says, hey, you've gotten a new form. A new form was completed. Let's see if I deleted. Yeah, so this is the email that we get from the site. It's, I guess, SiteBranch is the name of the CMS, that says, hey, somebody filled out a form. This is their full name, their email, and their phone number. So normally what I would do is I'd say, okay, cool. And then I'd go over to MailChimp and I would add a new, updated their standard of use, if anybody was curious. I would add a new contact. So, right, manual process, I would add in their email and their first name, last name, and then I'd hit save. But now, whenever this runs, it says, okay, you just got an email from notifications@sitebranch.com. Only run if the subject has form completed in it. And I want you to go check once a day. You can check once a minute, you can check once a month, whatever, however often you want the Logic app to go check and see. And again, this is all I did. I was just add these, and I'll show you guys in a second how easy it is to add new ones. So once this comes in, I'm going to use 2 variables here. I'm gonna have a variable for full name. I want it to be of type string. And this is complicated, but basically what that is doing is it's going in substring and saying, I want the full, oh wait, sorry, where am I? Oh yeah, it's taking it out of, because all I'm getting is, I'm getting this whole block of text. It doesn't know, the email is just saying like, here's the body of the email. It's not like, you know, here's the field, here's the property, here's the value, whatever. And so I'm having to parse out and say, okay, I want from full name after to until email, give me everything between full name and email in that text. So it's kind of, you know, but these built-in functions, it's worth showing here, you have all of these built-in functions. If you go to expression and say, hey, I want to concatenate two strings. I want to say, you know, A and then B, or full name and first name and those kinds of things. You have all of these functions that are built in that you don't have to do any code for. You just know, okay, like trim, for instance, I'm using trim. I want, once I grab the full name out of the email body, I want to trim off any extra spaces. And so that function is right there for me. And then email string, same thing. And then add new member to email list. So I pick what's the name of the email list, this is my email variable that I picked from up there. What is their status? Are they subscribed, unsubscribed, something like that. And then from this full name, I'm going to split on the space. I'm going to take whatever the first word is of the full name, last name is the second word. Then if any of this goes wrong, I want an error email. So basically this little red line right here, I set this up by saying if add new member to email list fails, skips, or is timed out, you should run this action. This right here is an action. And so that's what this red line down here means, and it says it can do, if I wanted to add something success, which I'll show you all, actually let's just go ahead and do that. If I also wanted to receive a success email, I just hit here and I say add a parallel branch. And now this is all of the actions that are available to me. So earlier when I was mentioning Google Sheets and Gmail and all of that, that's where this list comes from. So if you look right here, you can kind of see, okay, Adobe Creative, awesome. Azure Active Directory, there's, you know, what else is in here? Blogger, chat, like Salesforce Chatter, there's so many. Gmail, GitHub, FTP, tons of them. But I know, okay, I want to send another Gmail email. I'm going to pick Gmail and then say when I want to send, I don't necessarily want to do any of those things, I just want to send email. Who do I want to send it to? I'm going to send it, well, this is personal, so send it to there, and then I can say what parameters do I want to add to? I want to include a subject and I want to include a body. And maybe even an importance, why not? So the body is success, so is the subject, because why not? And then importance is high. And then I can also rename this here. This is just a best practice of saying send success email, so that it's not just generic send email. This says send error email. And then I hit save. So you'll notice this is not happening in Visual Studio or Sublime Text or Visual Code or any of those places that you do development. This is happening in the browser. So that's one of the nice things is these Logic App designers, you can do it in the browser or you can do it in Visual Studio. You can do it in the local environment if you don't want to do it in here. Because if you wanted to do it, be more customized and do a little bit harder things, you do have the code view. So everything that we're looking at is configured by JSON. So you can come in here, like this long thing that I wrote to take out the name, I wrote that here. I didn't write that in the designer because it's a little bit more complicated, right? And so now let's go look at one that ran, and then I'll stop for a second to do questions. So right here, you can see the frequency is that it runs every day. to go check if we've had a new form. And the one from today, 5:15, succeeded. This is the run, because earlier today I was filling out a form. You can see, okay, a next steps email was received. Great, there's a check mark here, that means that this action ran. And these are all the inputs. So it came into my inbox, it was from notifications at SiteBranch, and the subject had form completed in it. And then this is the data I got from when the API returned something. I got this body, which has a table and just a lot of HTML in it. And then I also got this snippet. So Wednesday, May 15th, 2019, full name, Shelby test, email, Shelby@Shelby, all that stuff that came right here. So that's what I have to work with. From in here, when I got to my full name variable, I was like, okay, I want to, from this snippet, I'm gonna take everything from full name to email, and that's gonna be my full name right there. And so this shows me, hey, this is what came out of that. That long string that I had that said trim and substring and all that kind of stuff, this is what it ended up with, Shelby test. Well, that's great. That is the full name that's in there. And same thing with email string, I can see, great, it parsed out Shelby@Shelby.com. And then you can see add new member to email list. And so there's my email. There's the first name and last name that I was able to do the split function and take the two different words. And then it shows output that after it sent the data over to MailChimp, this is what came back. So it successfully created a new subscriber in our MailChimp account, which is great. Okay, that's a lot of just me talking really fast and clicking everywhere. What would you guys like to ask questions about or see?
My first question about
yeah, and here I can.
It's about authentication. So I like the idea that you have a lot of third-party services or even like an app and put together. But how can you work on the authentication thing? Like, do they need to have like the key or anything? Like, how do you deal with complicated part?
Sorry, can you repeat it again? How do you deal with other applications?
So like the authentication, like I wonder.
Notification?
Like for API, you need to have a key to go to the service server, right? So
the authentication.
Yeah.
Okay, authentication. Yeah. Great. Yeah. So if I wanted, let's add a new one here. Let's say I wanted to, let's say new. So after that, let's say I want to, what do I have a login for? Let's do Office 365. So let's say I don't want to send an email through Gmail, I want to send an email through Office 365. Right now, I don't have a connection for Office 365. I have one for Gmail because I logged in when I created this. It's connected to my church's Gmail. But let's say I wanted to basically create that authentication, that key. It's going to take me out here to give me my login, say, oh, great, login to Office 365. I am still logged in as my Strodel at Credera. Oh, our Office 365 actually denies this. My company would have to say you're allowed to use Logic Apps with Office 365. Yeah, so that's not working. But let's see here, what can I delete? We can create a new one. I think this will be good. So I went, basically what it is, I hit add, and then I'm just typing Logic App. And then I hit create. And name, this is, we'll just say this is test. You have to have an Azure subscription. There, I happen to have one through my company, but you can use one. You can sign up for one, and you only pay for what you do. So Logic Apps are super, super cheap, and they're like 0.00125 for every action that's run, or something like that. All right, so this is creating my new Logic App. So now if I go in here, you'll see that I have my WWC test Logic App, but there's gonna be nothing in it. It's gonna be blank. So yeah, so right here, it didn't shoot me over, unfortunately, but right here it says, all right, hey, you're obviously starting fresh. Do you want a video on how to, what you're doing? I'm not gonna watch that because we already did, but there's all of these templates that you can use because of done a lot of these, I usually start with blank, and I usually know what I'm doing, or usually know what I'm going to build out. So I'm going to start with a blank logic app. And let's do Google Sheets with a new, say, different Gmail. Oh, there's no triggers there. So anyway, sorry. So these are some of the different connectors, right? And so I can see, okay, all these different things. What do I care about? Let's do Slack, actually. That's a good one. So when a file is created in Slack and so it's going to ask me to sign in here. And a couple of different teams. Let's do friends on Slack. Actually, let's do critters. Okay, again, Credera has to give me permission to do that. So, all right. So then we're going to authorize. Okay, allow access. Okay, so inside of now I've got, you can see connected to Strodel, and that's because that's the user that I use to log into Slack. And then I can go pick a channel here. So like we have a channel in our friend Slack called General, and every 3 minutes I want you to go check and see if there's a file created. So does that kind of give how the authentication happens with the API?
Because I wonder how you can create it, but sounds like if you can log into one system, they will get the permission for it.
Yep. And what's great, so my what it does is when I create this connection, it sends back a token that it stores, but it doesn't actually store my login information.
Got it.
So like my password that I just gave, you notice that a new window popped up. Like I authenticated with Slack, just like you would if you go to a website and it says, do you want to authenticate with Facebook or Google or LinkedIn, any of those things? That's what just happened.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And you'll also notice, I'm going to just hit save so this doesn't go away, but in my resource group now, I have, I should have a new connection here for Slack. So, but if I look at this connection, my login information is not stored anywhere. It's just saying like, hey, you're authenticated. If you want to reauthorize, you can, but you're already authorized. Okay. I also, my professor in college always used to say this. It's really hard to present on things that you do all day, every day, because she called it the curse of knowledge, right? Like this is my world. I just did this for 7 months on a client. I'm moving really quickly, using a lot of words. I have no idea if you guys know these phrases or have any familiarity with any of this. So I'd love to kind of answer some questions now. And I do have another live one that we can go look at if y'all want another example, but I think maybe we can sit here for a little bit, especially since it's a more intimate group.
Question.
Yeah.
I use something similar, which is the flow in the Microsoft 360. So I only see the difference between the two is that the flow only work inside the 360 environment with all the SharePoint app, everything. This one seems to work with all the applications. That's right.
Yeah, it's outside of your Office 365 world and SharePoint and all of that. So this is with basically any company that Microsoft has gone to and says, hey, we want to create a connector with your API. And so that's why companies like Jira and MailChimp and LinkedIn and Slack, all those companies have created an API connector for Azure Logic Apps.
And they work.
Yeah, and they work. Yeah, which is great. Yeah.
Is there a way to connect to custom APIs?
Yes. Yeah. So there is another video we can watch if we want. But if the other way that people use Logic Apps is, you can write your own connectors. So you can write custom connectors for your API. And I also, just because I know what project you're on, there are equivalents of Azure Logic Apps in Amazon. They're called Simplified Workflow Service, is what they are on Amazon Web Services. That they're called Simplified Workflow Service, which I think doesn't roll off the tongue quite as well as Azure Logic Apps. It's a little bit more, I think it explains a little bit better. But yeah, Simplified Workflow Service is very similar. That you can write custom APIs that have custom connectors inside of those Logic Apps. And we haven't talked about this yet, but you can also hook up your Logic Apps to run Azure Functions, which is an equivalent of AWS Lambdas, if you guys have ever used those before. So Azure, we haven't talked about this, but Azure Functions and AWS Lambdas are similar to this in the way that they run and they spin up an instance and then they disappear, but it's actually code. So you have access to the connectors, but you're writing it in code. You're not using an interface like this. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
When you're building these things, can you test them, or do you have to just run it?
So meaning, can you test them not in the portal?
Yeah, like are there unit testing tools or?
Yeah. So you can do unit testing in Azure DevOps. Azure DevOps used to be called Visual Studio Team Services, but there's a testing suite in there where you could run like load tests against these, or like the way that I implemented these for a client, and there was like a lot of them, but the way that we load tested them is we actually set up Postman. So like there were API, but we just like hit the API a bunch, because however the way to test right is to just trigger that event. And one of the triggers in here is an API, so we did like traditional API load testing.
Was that Postman?
Yeah, through Postman. Yeah, great question.
So like, what about like offline unit testing? Can you do that with Logic Apps?
I don't think so, because there's no offline debugging of this. So like when I was developing these in Visual Studio, I can't run them. I have to publish them to the portal and then run them here. Yeah. So I don't think so.
Question.
Yeah.
So for any company who is using 365 Microsoft 360, if they want something like this, they have to buy separately?
So you would have to have an Azure subscription,
Azure.
which comes with like the client that I just implemented these for didn't have Azure, but they did use Azure Active. They used Azure Active Directory, so they had a tenant, but they didn't have like a subscription to be able to do stuff like this. And so you do have to set one of those up. And so you would need to involve IT from your company to say, hey, we want to set up an Azure subscription, so that they could approve that. But it doesn't cost anything until you start using them. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Is there? I'm just thinking about. So. What type of clients need their Azure subscription? What does it for? There's a lot, but I just don't know the use case for Azure subscription.
Sure. So some people, when they want to move their applications to the cloud, they literally will move everything they have on a server on-prem to a server on the cloud. And so that's one reason for setting up an Azure subscription is like, hey, we don't want to own these servers anymore. We want to get rid of them. So we're going to move everything that's on that server onto a server that's hosted by Azure. Other reasons would be, the same thing with your applications and websites. You want to run websites on Azure. You don't want to run them on premises, and you want some of the, Azure has really good monitoring and really good analytics. So like if you want to know how many users are hitting my website, like all of that is built in to an Azure website. And they have like, as part of, the last slide in my deck is Azure resources, and there's a fundamentals of Azure course that you can take in there. It's like self-paced, and it explains about all the different service offerings of tons of different things that you can do in Azure. I mean, there's like 8 different categories, and under there they have like this huge graphic of like all the different services that they provide.
That would be awesome to know.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, that link. The Azure Fundamentals course is awesome. It's 9 hours, but it's online. Like you just, you read through it and you do some of the workshops and things like that.
Thank you.
Anything else, or do y'all want to see the other one?
Sure.
Oh yeah.
Have you done anything with social media for these?
Sorry, I'm laughing because one time I was like, when I first heard about these like a year ago or so, I was setting one up just to kind of mess around with it for Twitter, and I wasn't specific enough in my criteria. You can separate intent of tweet. Like if you have a company Twitter and you're like, hey, we want to, go watch our company Twitter, and everything that gets, everybody who retweets it, go pull on whatever their retweet content was, and then use the intent thing to say, is it positive, is it negative, or all that kind of stuff. So, but not in real life. I've only used it when I was kind of just playing around with this stuff. So the other example that I built out was I'm helping my high school, my high school senior class. I was a class officer, and I had to plan my high school 10-year reunion this year. So that has been hilarious and really fun. But one of the things that we've been doing is we created a form that's trying to get everybody's updated contact list. And so we have, I haven't seen these people in 10 years, right? I don't know if they have new last names. I don't know if they have...
Really?
What?
I'm at 35.
Oh. I won't say anything about 10 then. I'm excited. I'm excited to see everybody.
10?
And so these, anyway, very generic form, give me information, these type of things. Are you planning on coming? No, yet. Okay, great. But this list, we expect people to fill this out year after year after year more than time. So this is not our master list database of all of our people in our class, right? And so the need that I had was whenever somebody responds to this form, I want to go match it up with our master list and update our master information with whatever the latest version of the form is that came in. Does that make sense, the requirement there? Okay. And so I have another, this spreadsheet, this Google sheet is the one that is the backing of the form. So you can see like when people submit, this is the Google sheet that Google created for me that has all the contact information when people respond to the form. And then there's another, I have another spreadsheet that is our master list. So this class contact list. And this has more information and a couple of other things. And I want the latest submittal of the form to be updated onto my master list. And this way I can see like, hey, who am I missing? This person hasn't responded to the contact form yet, so I need to be able to go and find him. So the Logic app, what this looks like, and I'm going into the designer over here. This one, there isn't a trigger from the Google Sheets API that says, hey, every time a new row is added, go run the Logic app. There isn't one for that. So what I did instead is recurrence. I want this to run every day at 2 o'clock. And so this is kind of what that setup looks like, which is once a day at which hours. I could say I want it to run at 8 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 7 o'clock, all those kinds of things. I just said 2. And whenever it runs, what I want it to do is go get everything from everything in this spreadsheet, get all of these in here, because I have a column over here that says whether or not they have been added into the master spreadsheet or not. And then, so it's going to get all of those, and then it's going to say, and then get the master list. So I have my master list, class contact list, and I have the responses one. So those are the 2 Google Sheets. And then for each of the responses, go see and if it has been added to master yet or not. So if the column added to master is not equal to yes, then get that data, get the record, this is go find the record in the master value that equals it. So go find, it's really long, sorry, but some logic there that says like if first name, last name, because they have main names, I had to write a little bit of extra logic there. And then if that equals the name here. So again, I know this is a lot to take in at once, but just know that there are built-in functions here that allow you to do the type of things that you would do in code. And then over here, I'm going to switch, do a case statement basically on if I found it or not. So if the output of this, trying to find it is equal to 0, that means it didn't find anybody. Like for instance, in this example, I submitted the form as Shelby test. Well, Shelby test is not in my master list. So there's nobody to match to. I want an error email. So I'm going to send an error email that's saying, unable to match form response to master record. Then I'm gonna put the actual content of the form as an attachment for the email. But if case 2, if I do find one match, then I'm gonna go update that row with the data that I want to update it with, and then I'm going to mark the response as added to master. So I'm going to set that value equal to yes. And this is a lot to look at, I get that, but the message I'm trying to convey is like, you guys can go play around with this, and you can go create your own Azure subscription and create your own Logic apps. And I had a friend come to me, he works at Credera, and he was like, hey, my wife's father, so his father-in-law, was like, owns a snow cone truck. And he was really wanting to, he managed his entire company in Google Sheets. And he was like, hey, my father-in-law really wants me to write him a website to move some data or like take in some forms and move it around here. And he was explaining it all to me. He was like, do you think I could use Logic Apps for that? I was like, yeah, definitely. And so our friend, it's Scott Blankenship, he was like, well, sweet. And so he really did this. He built some Logic Apps for his father-in-law, and that saved him however many X number of dollars a year to just have Logic Apps doing his business instead of building a website and hiring a company or using Squarespace or WordPress or one of those companies. So before I switch back over to the slides, do you guys have any questions about all this? Yeah. No, I'm glad.
Yeah, I'm just, so this is fun.
It seems fun?
This playing with Logic App with all the criteria you set up, I think that's really fun.
Yeah.
I'm just curious about how you handle the error in the matchup. Like, I do the work around with matchup all the time, and Microsoft gave me the fuzzy lookup function, so it will handle sometimes people like Richard Henry, but they would just write like Rich Henry, but that list it would throw out for me like 90% this person should be this person.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I haven't used any of those yet, but I think there are actions that would do that. Like the example in the video about like intent and kind of the like artificial intelligence type ones. I haven't used any of those actions, but like you could always just kind of look and hear like what's intent, or like, yeah, there's some, no, I don't know what that one is, but you can look around and see like if there's kind of some smarter matching actions of, hey, I wanted to tell you like Rich and Richard are the same, and kind of some of those things. I haven't done that yet, but that's a great thing to Google for and see if they have that.
Do you have links to constant contact, or how do you find all the things you can tie together?
Wait, sorry, what was the first part?
How do you find is constant contact on the list of things that can link together, or how do you find the list of things that can link together?
Gotcha. Yeah. So like, how do I know what my options are?
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's some documentation in this and many more. And it is a little bit of like, okay, I know what connector I want to use, but I don't know what I necessarily want it to do. So this documentation right here has all of the different things you can connect to.
What's
So
constant contact on it?
constant contact?
I'm thinking of somebody I'm trying to help.
No.
Is it only Microsoft products?
No, all different products. It doesn't look like they have constant contact. Is that a website?
No, it's like MailChimp. Like MailChimp.
Oh, really?
Only with a more robust database.
Oh yeah, I'm surprised that they don't have that on here then. Is there any like other kind of name for it?
They got bought, so I wonder if it's under Endurance or one of the Endurance products.
I didn't know they got purchased.
Yeah, I don't know. They are definitely adding to these all the time. And so that would be a good thing to request or say, like, hey, can you go add this?
So what's the business case for adding these when it's not their product?
For Azure?
Yeah.
Because so it costs money to use these. So every time that this runs, I get charged 0.0125 for each one of these things in here.
Oh my god, so it's per usage.
It's per usage, but it's very, very cheap. So, and here, this is actually kind of a good segue of going into my client example. So I just got finished building this for a client. So there are, how many is that? 11, 4, so 15, 20, 22? 22 Logic apps that are supporting this architecture that we built. It took me about 2.5 months, and they've been live in production for 4 months right now. They're spending $60 a week to run an enterprise level architecture, which is really, really cheap. And so it seems like a lot when you're like, oh, I don't know what my usage is going to be. But and even the 0.000125 is just for the ones that use the actual company. Like if you're just doing like a variable or a for each loop or something like that, those are 0.000025. So those are even cheaper. But so Azure, it's worth it to them to go add a new connection to Constant Contact, because then you start using one of these, right? And they still, I mean, they make more money the more you use it. So like this, for instance, on this, we had a report that got generated once a day, put onto a server. We go pick it up, process it through a Logic app. We did the estimation on how much that was going to cost our client. It was literally 0.000001 for a day. So it's like, that's free, right? But yeah.
But for Azure, they just create it once as a commodity now. That there's some cost to end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every time it's used.
Right.
That's a great business model.
Yeah, so it's great. It's great for them, and it's great for like, I'm actually doing a presentation at Azure Dev Days next week on this client that I built this for, and one of the main reasons that we proposed this architecture to the client and that they let us do it is because the accelerated development timeline. So since I'm not having to build an API with Constant Contact or MailChimp, it's already all built, then I can do my work a lot faster. But yeah, it's great for Azure, great for developers.
So,
yeah.
are you saying they are all free? Like if I want to have the company website like Azure, for some reason, the space or the API connection are all free. They only charge the user whenever it's live.
Yep. Yeah, they don't charge you to make the connection
Or space.
with. Yeah. What do you mean space?
Like a storage. If it's a website,
That's great. Yeah. So actually, it's like Logic App storage is like, oh gosh, I need to look at it. It's like it's like 5 or 6 zeros before it, and you get like a certain amount free. My client has been running in this for 4 months. We've paid, I think, $2 in storage in 4 months. So, yeah. But yeah, I'll get through the rest of the other 2 slides, and then we can hop back over to Portal and do Q&A. But yeah, so this is real in production client need. They had an enterprise architecture that they wanted to do. They used Salesforce. And they were integrating with a time clock provider. So I don't know if you guys track your hours or not, but we use a system at Credera called Replicon. And so basically we put in our hours every week, every day, whatever. So did this client, and they needed a way to connect their time clock vendor with Salesforce. And so we proposed in an Azure Serverless architecture. And I had a blast building this out. It was so fun. And I trained their teams on how to do it. A lot of training to make sure they were comfortable with it. And it's been really great. It's been really cheap, and it was easy to transition because you can see in that designer exactly what it's doing, right? It's not like it's this huge thing of code, and you're like, oh, wait, that looks like it's setting that, and I can't really tell. It's very visual of when an email arrives, I'm gonna set this variable, and then I'm gonna add something to MailChimp. It's very visually easy. But yeah, anyways, just kind of if you want to sign up for Azure Dev Days, it's free. It's next Wednesday, and I'll be doing more detailed discussion of this. Oh yeah, what's up?
So since you can use your own APIs, could you do something to connect to things like Constant Contact?
Yeah, if Constant Contact has an exposed API that's public, then and you wanted to write your API to go talk to that, then you could have the Azure Logic App talk to your custom API that's integrating with Constant Contact. Yeah. So you would just be ahead of the curve there because Azure hasn't built it yet.
So how long did it take from beginning to end?
Yeah, great question. This took about 10 weeks to build these. So, and it was great. It's the first time ever on a client that I've been ahead of schedule. Development-wise, of like not stressed. We have a demo coming up. Oh my goodness. I had extra time at the end of my sprints when I was completing all these.
So the requirement was from the business side. They have
Yeah, so the business, there's more to this story about what happens after the integration puts data back into Salesforce, but basically they couldn't scale. They were processing all of their timesheets by hand, like faxing and paper and then manual input, and so they started using a time clock provider, a web-based time clock provider, but once they started using them, they needed a way to get all of that data into Salesforce instead of just manually typing it in like they were before, and so that was the client need that we responded to.
So Salesforce bought MuleSoft.
Yeah.
MuleSoft does, integration as well too.
Oh, sorry, I blanked on for a second on what MuleSoft is. Yes, MuleSoft is a big platform that does like enterprise service bus stuff.
Yeah, and then connectors and all that. So what is the advantage of one this versus, I mean.
So it's interesting because we actually did just propose MuleSoft for something I worked on. I think MuleSoft has a $150,000 licensing fee per year, right? I think so. I think that's right.
Well, it depends what you buy.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm not as adept in MuleSoft to compare them all. I do know that it's a great product and it has a ton of built-in things that you can use. We proposed it on this client I just was on, but this is definitely very simple and I would say more lightweight than MuleSoft. Yeah.
For this client, did they have a IT team that would, or did they have an IT team?
Like an internal development team, you mean? Yeah.
That would be able to maintain, or did you find if they didn't, that Logic Apps was a more user-friendly option because of the design aspect of it?
Yeah, great question. So the people that work for this client, they're Salesforce developers. And they had been .NET developers before. So they were comfortable with Visual Studio, which was a plus for us because you develop Azure Logic Apps in Visual Studio. But one of the parts when we were going through the proposal process with them is they really, really wanted to be able to maintain this afterwards. They did not want to have to be coming back to us with support questions or anything like that after the project was completed. And so that was one of the reasons why we picked Azure Logic Apps, is because they're really easy to learn. And so they are now, I rolled off 3 months ago, and so they've been using this technology. And I did do a lot of training, right? It's a brand new concept. If this is the first time you guys are seeing this, like you can imagine being like, oh wait, I'm supposed to support this as part of my job now? Like I need to know what these are and how to support. So it's funny, I wish I could like switch over to my other deck for Azure Dev Days, because I have all the transition and the training that I did for them about how to be comfortable with this. But it definitely went into the decision of, we think that this would be easy to learn, and so it's one of the reasons we picked it. Yeah, but their development team was small, so like they have not had to make very many changes to this. But we wanted it to be, if they do have to make changes, then they're prepared to do that.
So how much was their training? Did they take the Salesforce training or?
No, so I connected all the training. So the development phase was 10 weeks. We did QA for 3 weeks. And there's a lot of other like integrations and stuff that I didn't build that other people did on this project. But my portion of it was 10 weeks, and every week I did an hour-long technical demo for them. So as I was building things out, I showed them like, hey, here's how this is talking, this is where this is living, this is how I'm using source control, Azure DevOps, all those type of things. So I did that once a week during development, and then I created like over 20 videos of me recording my screen, talking, going through the code base, here's how you set up a new environment, all of that, because what's great about that is they can go watch those later when they're doing it and hit pause and be like, okay, now I do that. Play it, all right, do it again. And if a new person starts on their team, I've immortalized myself, whereas like they can go watch all those videos and they're not calling me being like, wait, how did you do that? Or the Word document that you set up doesn't make sense. And actually, and I mean, that's one of the ways I learned how to do all this too, is watching Azure YouTube videos. There are so many out there of, you can Google pretty much anything. Like, I had to set up a fake FTP server to do some testing. I literally Googled how to set up an FTP server on Azure. There's a step-by-step video of some guy recording his screen. Here's how to set up an FTP server on Azure. And now I know how to do it, you know? And so that was part of the transition. And then just on-site training of sitting next to them over their shoulder saying, all right, let's create your first Logic app. Let's create your environment, those type of things.
You said it's a flow, it's a GUI development, I would say, compared to the development that we have been used to doing.
Yeah.
So.
And so that's, yeah, there's the GUI development, like using this interface, and then there's the code view. But even the code view is JSON. Like, you have to be familiar with this, and you have to be able to know, like, okay, if I'm doing this function, I need to make sure I have both my closing parentheses and some of that, you know, experience to know what you're looking at here. But you can pretty much do everything through the designer. So. Okay. So kind of, I have one more slide and then we can be done, and that'll be great. Thank you. So just kind of some tips and tricks after working with these for a while. I hit on a lot of these, but you can use the portal or Visual Studio to develop both of them. I will suggest, like, so even in, like, as you're doing the portal and you saw that I just like clicked add new and I'm changing stuff and all of that, there's no source control there. There's no tracking of like the changes I've made. And so I would just say always, and this is why I prefer to do it in Visual Studio, is that way you can hook up to source control. And so that way your JSON is stored and you can see every change you make. And also, I always love to be able to completely delete, like destroy everything in Azure and redeploy every morning. I don't want to pay, like for Logic Apps, you don't have to pay while they're not being used, but for virtual machines or websites or something like that, I like deleting them when I go home so that I'm not paying for them overnight, you know, that kind of thing. And it's just best practice when you're doing Azure development to be able to destroy and recreate your environment as much as you want. And to be able to do that, you need to have your JSON and code stored in source control or something like that. Yeah, if you might want to use the code view if you want to edit some of those like really long expressions and strings and functions. Also naming conventions. So you notice when I created a Logic app, I put LA dash in front of it. It's because I always want to know what I'm looking at. Like in the breadcrumbs at the top where it said resource group, Logic app, you know, designer, something like that. I always, whenever I'm creating a new resource, I put the initials of the resource type at the front so that I always know what I'm looking at. And then this is one of the limitations of Logic Apps, except I heard that they maybe just fixed this, was when you're creating a new variable, you can't create new variables inside of loops, which is frustrating, right? But one of the workarounds around that is you can make sure that your loop doesn't run more than one at a time, and you can just overwrite that same variable every time. Anyway, that's probably more complicated than we need to go into tonight, but just that's something that I found was a limitation. And then another thing that actually did come up on my recent client project was connectors. The APIs have limits. So Salesforce wants to protect itself and say, hey, you can't spam us and hit us 1,000 times in a second. You know, like we have some limitations here, we have some controls. So I quickly found out that there are, you can only hit, and it's all on each connector has a documentation page. So there's one for Salesforce that said, here's all of our limitations, here's all of our triggers, here's all of our actions, all those types of things. But you can only hit the Salesforce connector 200 times a minute. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, okay. Or yeah, I think that's what it is. It may be more than that. But so you have to put in some rules inside of your Logic app to make sure that, like the way I did it was, by default, infinite Logic apps will spin up. So like if I got 1,000 emails from that Gmail like form completed, then I would get 1,000 instances of my Logic app. Well, sometimes like I don't want 1,000 of them to spin up. So I can actually set the concurrency to say, hey, I only want 25 to run at one time. And that's because I don't want to burn through my limitation here and start getting errors from my connectors. So you can set the concurrency to be 20, 25, whatever kind of you find out to be that sweet spot. And then all the other ones, so if I say I want into my trigger, the other 1,975 will go into a waiting status. I think this is one of the coolest features of Logic Apps is as soon as one of my 25 finishes, it'll automatically go pick up the next one until all 1,000 of them have processed. But only 25 will ever run at a time. And so I do that in my client situation, and basically it's just been really cool because it allows you to still run your other things cheaply and not have errors, but it's still serverless and it's scalable. You don't have to go out there and be like, oh, I need to make more room for those things. It's just gonna queue up and process as the resources become available. And then monitoring, each time you run, each time a Logic App runs, you get a unique ID. And so this makes it really, really easy to go find errors. So like in here, when this ran, this GUID right here, it's a really long number. I can include this number in my error email. So whenever I get my error email, hey, unable to match response to master list, I can come in here, put that GUID in here, and I can see the exact data that came through and caused that error. So
GUI, meaning GUI ID? You say GUI?
Sorry, no, it's just a unique identifier, like a really, really long numbers and characters identifier. But this is called snapshot debugging. So normally when you have a code application, you get an error, you have to try and recreate that error and be like, okay, what data came in that caused this error to run? I need to go recreate it. This is a snapshot of exactly what happened and what came in. So say for instance, somebody submitted something and I'm like, oh yeah, I have their name as Richard, but now they go by Rich. I'm gonna go update my master list so that his name is Richard so that the connection happens. And now I don't have to go ask Rich to resubmit his form. I can just hit resubmit right here. And it saves the request that came in. It has it in this snapshot right here, and you can just resubmit it. So this is one of the major advantages over using Azure Functions or even just regular code. All right. So we did it. That's all the content. That was so much. I hope that was helpful. I can answer questions about stuff about that, stuff not about that. I know we talked about my background, about clients, about Credera, and about this. So anything y'all want to ask.